The number one reason that people don't innovate is fear of failure, fear of being wrong, fear of not getting the organization's endorsement. And that fear holds so many people back.
And I love the idea of changing from fear to continuous learning, so that it's this notion of fail fast if you want, or fail forward. And those are easy words to say. They are not so easy to really do.
I like to say that innovation is about something that you and I do on a daily basis, but we don't take the time to give ourselves credit for it. And that is basic problem solving. And I love the title of your podcast, Out of the Comfort Zone, because it absolutely emulates and reinforces the innovation mindset, problem solving, orientation, insatiable curiosity, embracing change, and diversity of thought. And if you practice those four on a daily basis, you will find ways to get out of your comfort zone. I promise you.
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing it all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. So today we're talking about innovation. Here's the story. Your senior executives are expecting innovation from you and from your team. And I know you and your team are probably stretched pretty thin. So where do you even begin? How do you think about and drive innovation? What are the elements to creating an environment where new ideas can thrive and where you can generate real growth? Regardless where you sit in the organization. I am not talking about just in brand new product development. I'm talking about innovation in every single aspect of the business. Innovation in process, innovation in everything. So we have 5 C's that we think are going to help you, whether you're in sales, products, or any other function. And I think you're going to find it's doable, even if you feel like your time is highly limited. So my guest today is Lorraine Marchand. She's a business innovation and strategic growth advisor with the ability to break down complex business problems, yay, and develop creative solutions that are strategically aligned with a company's goals and that address the needs of multiple stakeholders. Sounds like a magician, and we need more of her. I'm just going to comment. It's a unique approach to create strategic partners and generate win-win solutions. 3 decades of experience in new product development, innovation, commercialization, data and AI digital transformation. She's held leadership positions in a number of companies like IBM, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Cognizant, and a bunch of others. And she's founded 4 companies, as if that isn't enough. And then she's been advisor to Fortune 500 companies like Hewlett-Packard, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, and more. The book that we're talking about, The Innovation Mindset. 8 essential steps to transform any industry. And I should say this book has won a number of awards. So I'm super excited, Lorraine, to have you in the conversation today.
Well, thank you, Wanda, and I'm delighted to be here. And I love the title of your podcast, Out of the Comfort Zone, because it absolutely emulates and reinforces the innovation mindset, which is about a problem-solving orientation, insatiable curiosity, I like to say, and certainly embracing change and diversity of thought. And if you practice those 4 principles on a daily basis, you will find ways to get out of your comfort zone. I promise you.
I love it. I need that as a whole, like that needs to become my new ad for the podcast. I love it. All right. I always like to start with why. Why are you interested? Why do you care? And what I'm looking for is just kind of like, what's the part of this that touches your heart that you think is really powerful?
Yeah, well, just by way of a little background, when I started on this journey of writing my first book, I've now written the second one, which some of the principles that we'll talk about will come from the second book. You'll get a sneak peek at the new material. And teaching and developing courses, it was really because I had made so many mistakes on my own innovation journey, whether I was an entrepreneur in large organizations like some of the ones you've cited, or whether I was the founder of a startup, that I thought, if I can share some of my learnings and it can help accelerate the path of somebody new to the field or middle in the field or late to the field, let me just try to share that. So my goal is really to help other paths be accelerated and to avoid making the mistakes I made. Because believe me, you will find your own mistakes to make, so you don't need to repeat my mistakes. So when I wrote the innovation mindset, it was about how individuals could bring a new idea to the marketplace. And so the 8 steps are all about how you take something from idea and bring it to the commercial marketplace. And as I was out talking with executives and corporations and organizations and government across different kinds of industries, I kept getting the same comment. The problem is not me, Lorraine. I'm very innovative. I can follow your 8 steps. The problem is it. And I said, what is it, to a team of sales executives at Novartis, a huge pharmaceutical company? The bureaucracy. We're run by attorneys. There's all this regulation. Every time we bring a new idea to the fore, somebody knocks it down and they put us back in our box. How do we innovate from where we sit in an organization in order to help drive growth? Help me understand how to do this from an organizational level. And so that led me to my own research around the 5 principles, which are in book 2, and to interviewing 100 executives across industries and types of organizations and even geographies to say, what do all these folks have in common? So it reinforced the 5 principles and added a lot of really rich case studies to my own knowledge, which I can share with you. And I'd like to just say that the case studies are all about real active people and businesses. We are not rehashing Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos time after time after time, which so much of our literature does. So I just love the fact that so many people were willing to share their stories.
All right. So there are 8 steps, if I get this straight, to go from the concept to commercialization. But there are really 5 principles that allow you to have an innovation culture, if you will, to break through the bureaucracy, to get people to pay attention to the idea in the first place. Did I get that straight?
Yes.
All right, I want to know the 8 steps, but I am first interested in the 5 principles. So walk me through these 5 principles. What are they?
All right. Well, thank you. And the 5 principles are all around the organization, and they build off of that first book. And the 5 principles are in book 2, which is called No Fear, No Failure, 5 Principles for Sustaining Growth Through Innovation. So I love the fact that we're starting there. As I did my research, and it won't be surprising to you, Wanda, because the title of your podcast is Out of the Comfort Zone, and I know that you do coaching. The number one reason that people and organizations don't innovate is fear of failure. Fear of being wrong, fear of failing, fear of not getting the organization's endorsement. And that fear holds so many people back. And so the first principle won't be surprising to you at all either, because innovation has to start with the right culture. And if you can abolish fear in the culture, Microsoft, Satya Nadella talks about replacing fear with a continuous learning culture. Jeff Bezos did talk about how if we're not innovating at the size of our failures, then we're not going to be innovating at a size that's going to move the needle. And so many current day leaders understand that we've got to replace that fear with continuous learning. And one of the most pronounced comments that I got on that from the CEO of a digital company in Silicon Valley, he actually told me, as a CEO, and he's one of these like 30 under 30 kind of guys, like really brilliant. He said, my job is not to set the product roadmap. It's not to set budgets. It's not even to hire brilliant people. My singular focus is driving a culture that supports innovation for the long haul. And in order to do that, one needs to find what we call river guides. I think that's a great metaphor for identifying those individuals up and down the organization that are going to embody that culture, carry it forward, and emulate it to everybody at every level across that organization, because that's the only way that you're going to bring cultural change, if it's from the top all the way to the bottom and across the organization. So that's the first principle.
All right, before you go to the second, let's spend a little time talking about this because I think everybody would say, you're right. I'm not telling you my idea because the last time somebody said an idea, they got terribly embarrassed and I'm not getting embarrassed and so on. I mean, I hear those stories over and over and over again, as I'm sure you do, even more so. So, and I love the idea of changing from fear to continuous learning so that it's this notion of fail fast if you want, or fail forward, or learn something, or what do we know? And those are easy words to say. They are not so easy to really do. So give me an example of something someone has done to create a culture of continuous learning.
Well, for example, I'll give you my own story. So, as an executive, and you name some of the companies that I've worked at, I created what we called Fail Free Fridays. And I wanted to create this continuous learning culture with my executive team. We were in a very stodgy corporate bureaucracy where there was a lot of fear of failure. And when things went wrong, people would push them under the carpet. And as a leader, I found it was really, really hard to ask the right kind of questions to unravel what was going on. So by creating Failure-Free Fridays, I would bring my executive team together. I said, everybody's going to nominate a problem. It's got to be a real life problem, something you're grappling with right now, something that maybe peaked this week. And together we're going to discuss it. We're going to brainstorm. We're going to help you find solutions. You're not alone in this. And I want to embrace failure because the only way that we're going to learn and get better and have continuous learning is if we bring these things front and center. So I did that with my teams. It was super popular. And I would say that I have encouraged organizations and team heads to do that. And I've gotten feedback that when people have attempted to do something like that, it's worked out well. It doesn't have to be Fail-Free Friday. I mean, it could be something where you pull your team together on a bi-weekly basis and you do nominate a problem. What are we dealing with that's a problem in terms of process you brought up, or a customer, or something that's internal to the organization? And how can we just discuss it and start to do some problem solving as a team? That's a small way that everybody can get started.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a nudge on that one, which is if you're going to run a brainstorming session, present the problem, present the case, maybe present some things that you have tried, but then don't comment on the ideas. Like, let the ideas come. Don't say, oh yeah, we tried that, because when you do, you shut down everybody else's thinking. So just, even if you've tried it, let it come up, because it may come up in a different way the second time or the third time.
Boy,
okay.
Really, really good. I just want to underscore that because in addition to the fear of failure, I think one of the most pronounced ways that we show that failure is by holding on to the status quo. And when you say something like, we tried that, it didn't work, that's what you're doing. And you're right, you're throwing cold water on it. In fact, you don't even have to go into solution mode. You know, you can talk about the problem and different aspects of it and evidence of it, and you can throw a lot of different ideas to the fore without coming out with a solution. So thank you for that additional wisdom.
I love that. So replacing the fear of failure with continuous learning. And I love what you said, that one of the ways of showing failure is by holding the status quo, fear of failure. Great. All right. So that's principle number one, a culture of continuous learning. What's principle number two?
Well, it has to start with the customer next. So after we've created our culture, the most important thing is that we stop the inside out way of thinking, because that also is not innovative. It keeps us in the status quo. And we have to practice outside in thinking. And the outside in thinking helps us to start to look at things, work, problems, etc., experiences through the lens of our customer. And just to underscore that again, easy words to say, and time again, I see companies not doing this, including companies that I've been in or companies that I'm working with, coaching and doing workshops with. And you really have to rewind the way that you're thinking and bring that customer front and center to get people to think differently.
I can't tell you how many times I see this. And in fact, I coined a phrase for it years ago. And I say it's a product or service in search of a market, as opposed to a market in search of a solution. How many times do we have this, what we think is a great idea, what we think the customer would need, what we think is a perfect thing? It's true in sales. I see it constantly in like financial services sales. I have the solution for you. Well, no, you didn't even start with what I cared about, what I was worried about. So starting with that customer. Okay, you got a practical example to make sure people start with the customer?
Yeah, and again, this has to be a practice that starts at the CEO and again goes from top to bottom and bottom to top. But I love the story of one of the individuals that I interviewed is in a digital engineering firm. And he would do town halls on a regular basis, encouraging everybody across the organization to talk to the customer and solve that customer's problem. And he had a junior level analyst one day who had the customer on the phone. They were doing the software development for a system. It was a sporting goods company. And the individual on the phone wanted them to modify the system so that it would apply a nationwide discount. And this junior analyst said, well, why do you want a nationwide discount? And they said, well, because it's not selling in these couple markets and we think that's bad news. So we just have to reprogram everything and provide this across the board discount. And he, this young guy, he said, well, no, actually, he said, all of your markets are designed individually. And so if you can tell me which specific markets you want to discount, I'll just discount those and we can keep the other markets at the current price. He ended up saving them millions of dollars. They were going to slash the price on some items just because they weren't selling in 3 markets when they had 103 markets where they were selling at the normal price. And that was just such a great example. Individuals brought forward at the town hall and made an example of, look, just simply asking your customer, why? Why?
Yeah.
Very
What's
simple.
the problem? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the problem? What's the issue? I have a senior sales guy here in London, actually, who says, if I go to one more presentation where we come with a pitch book and we open with a pitch book where we say, we know your problem, dear customer, and here's how we're going to solve the problem. He says, I'm going to strangle somebody. Not literally, of course, because it's the wrong place to start. You start with, okay, what's on your mind? And then you assume that somewhere along the line, some of the things that you've thought about might be relevant. If not, go home and do some more homework. Same idea. Talk to the customer. All right, that's principle number 2. So a culture of continuous learning, outside in thinking. What's principle number 3?
Well, principle number 3 is collaboration. And as I use the term collaboration, I just want to clarify, when I was working at Bristol Myers Squibb, this was back in the early 2000s, collaboration was a core behavior. So it was rolled out as a core behavior, and it meant that you were easy to get along with. You were a good teammate, and you didn't cause any trouble. How anti-innovative is that? But collaboration has evolved and changed, and it is now a strategic imperative. And so the definition of collaboration from a business perspective is when at least 3 lines of business, they can be product, services, support, you name it, but they come together, they integrate around a set of common goals, around the customer, around the go-to-market. And this principle has proven that revenues can quadruple when you've got these various lines of business that come together around one goal and around that customer. And not only do they quadruple in terms of revenues coming in, because now everybody's seeing additional ways to upsell and cross-sell and create new solutions and products, but you'd be fascinated to see the new intel that comes in about the customer, because the different business lines and functions and support services are now part of being on the front line when sometimes they weren't, because product led. And so new insights are coming in, and now we can really innovate around the customer in ways that we never thought possible. Maybe it's the financial model, maybe it's the way we do contracts, maybe it's how we do invoicing that ends up making that customer love us even more, because we're solving Monday day-to-day problems that product wasn't ever designed to solve for a customer.
Yeah. Plus, that means that you're talking to many, many more people in that customer, because purchasing is talking to their counterpart, finance is talking to their counterpart, and suddenly have many more perspectives of what's happening inside that customer. So I love this. Collaboration, 3 lines of business / function that come together around a common goal, a customer, or something about going to market, and work together to find a solution. Okay? Great. Do you have a great example of how a company has done this?
Well, actually, probably some of the best examples have been in the real estate market. If you think about how online or digital real estate companies have come together to be the broker, to be the supplier of houses, to buy the house, to be the mortgage underwriter, like everybody can understand that example. So I could describe, much more complex examples. I love the one of AMD, the big technology company. And one of the individuals that I interviewed, she had a challenge of taking to market a 64-bit chip. The only problem was, as she told me, there was no 64-bit operating system. And so she collaborated with SUSE, a German engineering company, Red Hat, and Microsoft, and together they created a 64-bit operating system that would now require these 64-bit chips. And that was probably one of the most creative, innovative, just, go get them kind of ideas that I heard around a go-to-market from someone who's like, oh, I was told to, I was in charge of sales for a 64-bit chip, but guess what? There was no market. So I went and created the market. Collaboration. And everybody benefited.
Yeah, I can imagine everybody does benefit from that one. All right, so collaboration, 3 or more businesses units, not always in the same company as you just illustrated. They can be a variation, come together with a common goal to solve a particular problem. Okay, what's principle number 4?
Well, let's go for chance. But again, I'm not talking about buying a lottery ticket and hoping through serendipity that you have the winning number this week. When I talk about chance from a business perspective, it's investing in risk. And I like to cite Sergey Brin, who actually developed what he called the golden ratio back in 2000. And what he practiced at Google and what he found was that companies that were investing 70% in core, 20% in adjacencies, and 10% in innovation, things that they did not know were going to pan out. Could be end up being breakthrough, transformative, disruptive, but you're just investing in something that you think you're going to take a big chance on, that 5 years later, 70% of new growth came from that 10% innovation. So it has this whole reverse mathematical concept, if you will, that 5 years later, 10% of your growth was coming from the 70% investment in core, 20% was still coming from that adjacency, but 70% of future growth is coming from that 10% investment in innovation. And when I conducted my interviews and shared this ratio, it was really interesting to me because the people that I interviewed all wanted to invest in innovation at like 30 to 40%. They all thought that was really important to have really big innovation budgets. But when we actually examined how much they were investing in innovation, it was much smaller than even they thought. So we may be fooled into thinking that we're doing this well, but I really challenge everybody to look at the numbers. Look at how you're spending your budget. Look at where your resources are deployed. Look at the last big project that you invested in and where it landed. You might feel as though you're investing a lot in innovation and find out that you're actually not. But that portfolio approach is very important.
Okay, so you can also look at how you're spending time. I think this one is a really useful thing for individual leaders, not individual contributors, but leaders as individuals, to look at their allocation of time. 70% in your core activities seems really good to me. 20% of your time on things that are related and necessary, adjacent. 10%. 10% of your time on new things. Sounds like I think that would be incredibly productive. Okay. What's principle? So that's chance. What's principle number 5?
Well, change. And we all talk about the need to embrace change. We love to talk about the pivot. The pivot is changing direction when the roadmap tells you to go in a different direction, but you never lose hold of your strategy, that true north. And so we love to talk about the principle of change, but it's really tough because so many times change requires that we dismiss some of these, golden themes that we've come to believe in. So again, we have to disabuse ourselves of the status quo. And oftentimes change requires that we go backward before we go forward again. And I want to share the story of a colleague of mine who is a consultant, and he's also an author and an advisor. But at one time in his career, he was a professional dancer. And I love bringing in examples from sports and performing arts. I think they're so applicable to business and the things that we work with because they're very tangible. And he described how he was consistently making it into semifinals, but never into quarterfinals, like the last six, or last 12, but not in the last four. And his dance coach told him one day, she said, Mark, you are going to have to learn how to breathe. Now lives in London, and he's kind of a snarky guy. And so he said something like, I'm pretty sure I know how to breathe. And she said, well, calm down. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You are going to have to learn how to breathe differently, because a performer has to breathe from their diaphragm, and they get their energy from breathing. It's a principle in yoga. I'm going to teach you how to breathe differently, but it's going to take you a while practicing it before you get it right. So guess what? You're probably going to lose competitions for the next year before you master this and actually start to get better. He said that is exactly what happened. He had to be willing to take a chance to lose competitions, but when he mastered it, because he kept practicing and practicing, he started to make it into the quarterfinals. And we chuckled saying, we think nothing of putting an executive in a brand new role without any training, without any orientation, without any way to come back and practice and test things. We just throw them into a new role, right? And say, swim or sink. Why can't we take some of these same principles that we use in performing arts, that we use in sports, and bring them into the business world?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like the notion that we need to practice, that we need to be able to break skills down to their component parts so that you can build a skill up, that we need coaches who can observe and give feedback. Yes, music to my ears. So taking a chance or change, which means sometimes things go backwards before they can go forward. All right, so 5 principles, moving from a fear of culture to a culture of continuous learning. Outside in thinking, customer first, customer centric. Collaboration, 3 or more lines of business / functions together. Chance is thinking about risk, 10% of your time on things that are truly new, time, money, budget, etc. And change, willingness to dismiss things and to go backwards in order to go forwards. Okay.
Those are the 5 principles.
Sounds good to me and resonates with everything else I know. So now let me ask a hard question, because I know it's on everybody's mind who's listening. It's like, yeah. That's up to my CEO and my senior executives to do this. Okay. I'm going to argue, even if you're at the mid-level, you can create a similar culture in your unit. But let's say I'm at a mid-level or even an upper mid-level, and my senior stakeholders are saying, I want more, and my team is stretched thin. What do you recommend? How do you recommend they begin to think about this notion of innovation?
Well, that's a great question, and you're right. It comes up all the time, and a fair question, and kudos to everybody who is so motivated that they want to try to crack the code on that one. The first thing that I'll say is, so often we're intimidated by the word innovation. And so we think that we've got to be the Steve Jobs or the Bill Gates or the Jeff Bezos or the Elon Musks, or we're no good at innovation. But the fact of the matter is, I like to say that innovation is about something that you and I do on a daily basis, but we don't take the time to give ourselves credit for it. And that is basic problem solving. Are you solving a problem today? Are you solving a problem that a customer cares about or another stakeholder cares about? If you are, then you're innovating. Now, this type of innovation might be termed more incremental, more renovation, maybe than big disruptive innovation, but it's still innovation and it's still a great place to start. So I like to tell people from an organizational level to, as you mentioned with your teams, identify one problem a week. And if it can be a customer problem, all the better. Have your team nominate a customer problem that they're struggling with, come together as a team and figure out what you can do to solve that problem. It doesn't have to be transformative. It could be an improved process. It could be a tweak to a service or product. And then give yourselves credit for that. I would make sure that you let senior management know that you fix something and that you figure out ways to incentivize and reward people for bringing these new ideas to market. Another thing that I've seen work really well is don't go big bang. You don't have to try to change everything tomorrow. Similar to the woman who created the go-to-market for AMD, making the chips, she started with a pilot. She started with a very small market, the chip, a couple of critical players. She didn't go and ask her bosses for a 25-person sales team. She proved that it was going to work, showed the pilot, gathered her data, and then they expanded it. And that's another important point. If you're going to be innovating, what is it that you want to measure? And so get together with your team as you think about these areas that you want to focus on and figure out the metrics that matter and design your experiment, because it's an experiment, in a way that it's going to move the needle on those particular metrics. And then I think the fourth one is this idea of the river guides. I think that it's terrific if individuals within your group, within the organization, can be anointed, air quotes, or identified as delegates of innovation, innovation leaders, river guides, if you will, and empower those people. Ask them to bring new ideas forward. Ask them to be the cheerleaders to the rest of the organization for innovation. So small things that you can do, Wanda. Not everything has to be big bang, but do make sure that you measure it, that you capture it somewhere, in writing, again, air quotes, and bring it to the attention of your management so that you start to create the nomenclature and the metrics around innovation and what it means to you and your team. They're looking for you to step forward and define that. Don't ask them to define it for you because it's going to put you in a box. Define it for yourself.
Right. I love that you focus this on, something simple, like I have a problem to solve. And, it's such an easy place to say, haven't we seen this problem before? Don't we see this kind of problem on a regular basis? Can't we do something about it now that we could repeat or that we could use every single time so that we don't have to? There's all sorts of small, creative ways of saying, let's solve this problem once and for all, for now. Like that's an example of something very simple, very, very trivial, but also in other ways, other small ways. And I am a massive fan of experimenting. I think your senior leaders want more evidence that it's going to work. So give them a tiny piece of evidence. Do a tiny experiment. Show me. And that's that initiative, that strategic thinking that your senior stakeholders are looking for to come from you. So excellent, excellent ideas. River guides. Explain, for those of us who don't know what that concept means, explain what you mean by a river guide. What's a river guide doing other than cheerleading?
Well, for example, in this one organization that was a digital supply chain company based in Silicon Valley. And as they grew and expanded, they opened up offices in India and China and different countries. And the CEO, who was a real big believer in creating this right kind of culture and coined this idea of river guides in his organization, he made sure that he established certain rituals, right? Rituals and practices that were important to spread across the organization and emulated their values. And one of them was this idea of a pancake breakfast. And when they were small and they were hiring new people, they would have a pancake breakfast and they would bring new people in, have pancakes at 7 o'clock in the morning because it allowed them to meet until 8:30. Everybody liked pancakes, and they could kind of describe the company to them, express the values, have a comfortable, common conversation, and they would decide after pancake breakfast, is this person a fit for us? Well, the idea of a pancake breakfast really took off with these individuals who he identified as river guides, because they started to spread this idea of the pancake breakfast across the organization. They had pancake breakfasts with different kinds of syrup. They had gluten-free pancakes. They had strawberry. They had chocolate chip. And then he really chuckled one day when he got a call from a colleague in China who was one of the river guides. And he says, well, we're having dumplings this morning. And he said, dumplings? He said, yeah. He said, well, you said that we had to have these pancake breakfasts, but we don't eat pancakes. So we're going to have dumplings. Is that all right? And Dave howled. He said, it is absolutely not only all right, that's fabulous. And so India had its own version of the pancake breakfast. So that's what your river guide can do. They can take these rituals that are important to the company, and now they can help you fashion, adopt them, spread them, and customize them in ways that work for the culture.
All right. So you're right that they're cheerleaders, but they're champions.
Champions is a much, much better word. Yes, I shouldn't have said cheerleaders. They are champions, and they live by example. So they are exemplifying innovation in the way they think, work, talk. It's exactly.
And they adapt. It's not like, let me pack it up, let me plop it down. It's let me take the concept here and find another way to do it that works in this area. So they're, again, living innovation.
Yes, yes.
Adapt, not adopt. Okay. All right. So do you see a company that really gets it right in terms of innovation?
Well, I do think so. I'll go ahead and mention a behemoth of a company because it'll be a brand everybody knows. I'll mention two, one that you know and one that you don't. I do think NVIDIA is getting it right. I think they've gotten it right for a long time. And one of the reasons is that, when they started to release their own versions of technology and chips and toolboxes, they did it alongside their customer. They studied that customer journey and they kept innovating new items along that journey map and along that supply chain in order to solve their customers' problems. They didn't stay with one industry or one type of customer. They have programs for startups. They have programs across all different types of industries. So I really like the way they have just grown and evolved with their customer and been very, very true to that model. A company that you might not be so aware of, although if you think about the last time you were in a restroom, you might have seen their label. It's called Ecolabs. The reason I love Ecolabs is because they are a 150-year-old and counting company that is still innovative. Why? Because in the US alone, they have 3,500 engineers that are their field force that are in the field every single day meeting with customers. And one of the innovation stories that I really loved occurred during COVID. And even though we had masks, et cetera, they were still meeting with their customers, talked to hospitals, and found out that the main reason that there were these long queues in front of the hospital was because it was taking so long for the sanitizing sprays to dry. They had to keep people outside to wait 20 minutes to bring a new patient in. They went back armed with that information. They had the technology to make very rapid drying solutions. And literally within 3 weeks, they released a new sanitizing spray that dried in seconds as opposed to minutes. And within the next 3 months, it was on the market and across their hospital supplies nationwide and even country to country. So those two companies, I think NVIDIA, a big behemoth, but they track with the customer, and Ecolab, a name you might not recognize, but they've been doing it right for 150 years. What do they do right? They really do walk their talk when it comes to the customer. So those are probably the best examples I can give you, Wanda.
That's great. I love that. And the Ecolab story is not so much a brand new product as it is an adaptation they kind of already knew and sort of already knew. I just didn't know anybody needed it. And suddenly, oh, yes, they do need it. And here's why they need it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you could call that incremental innovation, solving a customer's problem, and it developed a whole new revenue line and was a huge success with the customers because they were so happy that a problem was solved. So
Right.
you're absolutely right.
And a massive problem for all of those. I love those. So any advice for managers who are, again, in these, not in the top ranks, but kind of in the middle, upper middle, to create a kind of culture where people around them will do all these 5 principles that you've been talking about?
Well, I think that a lot of it needs to start from within. And people will often tell me that they don't feel as though they're innovative, wired that way, practicing it in the way that they should or want to. And so I like to say, make yourself a student of observation and make it a habit every day to observe 3 problems. Write them down in a journal, type them into your cell phone. It can be something that happens at the coffee machine. It can be something that happens in traffic, at an interaction at your children's school. They don't have to be grand things. But as you start to observe and as you start to note problems and actually focus on them, and if you do start to record them, I often tell people when you do innovate, it's usually something that you fix that is very close to home, very personal for you, something you're experiencing. And so this is going to be the fodder that you're going to use when you do decide to make some change in some key areas. It's not about going out and solving global hunger tomorrow or something that's distant from you. Solve problems that are in your own backyard. But first, you have to be an observer of those problems. So if you can take that 15 minutes, 10 minutes a day to observe, write things down, reflect, you will become more innovative yourself, and hopefully you'll be able to encourage others. Another small thing that you can do, redesign a routine per month. Maybe you take a different way that you drive to the gym or the grocery store or go to work, or maybe you do something else a little bit differently. But in that same spirit that you've got to be innovating in small ways yourself so that you can be a river guide and championing it, and so that you can actually see when an opportunity is in front of you, because innovation is like a muscle that you have to work. And if you don't work it, then you're not going to be ready for the sprint when that opportunity comes and a manager says, hey, we've got this big problem a customer is facing. What do you want to do about it? You need to be practiced and tuned up and ready to go.
There you go. I love that one. All right. So I love this notion of observation, because as you start to observe, you're going to see problems. And I like that you're focusing your innovation efforts on problems. Not problems we already know the answer to, problems we don't yet have an answer for and we need to find one. There's your innovation space. So observe, that trains your muscle to notice. And then second, redesign. A routine anything just periodically, so you use that muscle for redesign. I can even imagine that getting your team together once a month and saying, okay, we're picking a routine process and we're going to speculate how else we could design it. Whether we do it or not doesn't matter. Just getting in the habit of rethinking that way is a great exercise.
I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
All right, Lorraine, we still haven't talked about the 8 steps. So I think we're going to have to tease that for the next podcast, to come back and say, what are the steps that go from idea all the way to marketplace? There are 8 steps. You can find out more about that in the book I mentioned, The Innovation Mindset, the 8 steps to transform any industry. But the part we've been talking about today is much more about the culture. How do you create an environment around you where people bring ideas forward, where you bring ideas forward? And that book is called No Fear, No Failure. So Lorraine, if people wanted to reach out to you, where's the best place to find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm Lorraine H. Marchand on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I have a website where I also take contact information, lorrainemarchand.com. So those are probably the 2 best places, Wanda. And the new book will be published by Columbia Business School in January. So first discussed on your podcast here. So
Absolutely. A great teaser for everybody out there. Lorraine, fascinating. I love the tidbits. I love the 5 principles. Culture of continuous learning, outside in thinking, customer first, collaboration, 3 or more people, 10% of time and resources on taking chances in brand new areas, and change. Be willing to go backwards in order to go forwards. How much more can we ask for it?
let's just try to do it.
Go practice it. I think that's the second thing, is go do some of it. Just practice, just experiment. It's been fabulous talking to you. And for those of listening, if you would like to watch Lorraine and I in this conversation and in our collaboration, please join us on our brand new YouTube channel at Out of the Comfort Pod. We also have a brand new Instagram account dedicated to the podcast called Out of the Comfort Pod. We'd love hearing from you, so leave a message on any of those channels or send me a note directly on outofthecomfortzone.com. And until next time, good luck getting out of your comfort zone.